I used to be the operational backbone of a major company for 25 years, until one day, a young punk showed up, called me uncle, and took my job. He wasn't some stranger, he was the CEO's son-in-law. 6 months later, I was tossed out of the company like expired goods. But that wasn't the most bitter part. What hurt more was the fact that I had been the one who taught him everything he knew. Then I disappeared for a while. And when I came back, none of them were laughing anymore. My name is Jack Harmon. I'm 52 years old. I was born and raised in Amarillo, Texas, a small city filled with warehouses and manufacturing plants. For the past 25 years, I worked at Keller Tech Industries, a company specializing in heavy machinery and logistics for large-scale construction projects. I started at the very bottom, loading shipments out in the yard. Blazing sun or muddy rain, I never showed up late or complained. Every day, I watched how the technicians operated the machines, how the managers handled contracts. I learned everything through sweat, sometimes blood. And gradually, I earned their trust, moved up the ladder, and eventually became head of operations, managing hundreds of contracts and nearly 60 technicians. There was a time a storm wiped out our entire warehouse system in Dallas. I was the first one on site and the last one to leave. After 3 days without sleep, I led the team in rebuilding a temporary setup just in time to deliver the shipment to our client. Back then, my former boss once clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Jack, if Keller Tech had to start from scratch, you'd be the first person we'd keep." I've never been good at giving presentations or playing office politics. But I could get things done, and I taught others to do the same. So many young folks started under me, awkward, unsure, and within a few years, became supervisors, managers, and respected professionals. I never held them back out of selfishness. On the contrary, I was proud when they outgrew me. To me, Keller Tech wasn't just a job. It was a part of my life. Once, I even canceled a family vacation just to help out on an emergency project in Kansas. My wife asked me, "Can't you take a break for once?" I just smiled. This company feeds us. I've got a responsibility. I believed that if you lived right and worked hard, you'd always have a place. Turns out, I was wrong. And the price of loyalty, well, I learned that lesson the hard way. Everything started to shift one Monday morning. I was in the middle of a meeting with my tech team about a supply contract in El Paso. Suddenly, Warren Keller, the CEO, walked in with a young man wearing a blazer, a shiny Apple Watch, and hair slicked back with gel. Keller introduced him. "Everyone, this is Ethan Moore, our new Deputy Director of Operations. He'll be working with Jack to upgrade our processes and take Keller Tech to the next level." I shook Ethan's hand, polite as always when welcoming someone new. But I couldn't ignore the look he gave me, not respectful, but evaluative. Not exactly hostile, but like someone eyeing an old piece of furniture, trying to decide whether to replace it now or wait a few months. Ethan was in his early 30s, had an MBA from California, and supposedly worked at a logistics startup that failed within 18 months. Nobody mentioned that at Keller Tech, but I heard it from an old colleague at HQ. More importantly, Ethan was now the son-in-law of CEO Warren Keller. They just had the wedding less than 3 months ago. From the day Ethan joined, things began to change, not loudly, but subtly and uncomfortably. The meetings I used to lead? He now sat at the center. I barely got through half a sentence before he'd cut me off. He often threw around terms like outdated, behind the times, and lacking digital thinking to describe the systems I was running. At first, I kept my head down. I figured if I proved results through action, Ethan would come around. I shared everything with him, my optimized logistics flowcharts, equipment inventory sheets, the client relationships I'd built. He nodded, thanked me. But then I saw him use the very materials I gave him in presentations to upper management, without ever mentioning my name. Worse, he began replacing people. Some of the veteran technicians I had worked with for years were reassigned to secondary roles or quietly pushed out. In their place came flashy young process specialists, great at PowerPoint, but clueless around real machinery. I had to follow up after them just to fix the mess, like when one rollout plan failed because someone miscalculated the warehouse load capacity. One time, I went to Ethan's office to talk about a delayed shipment. He was casually sipping a latte, barely looking up as he said, "Jack, I think maybe it's time for you to start letting go. Your methods work, but they no longer align with Kellertech's future direction." I froze. Letting go? I'm 52, he's barely 35. I could have been his boss in 2 different companies. And if he weren't the CEO's son-in-law, he probably wouldn't have even made it past our first interview. His words weren't just disrespectful, they were a warning. He was pushing me out. Not openly, not quickly, but step by step, backing me into a corner. I started to see the signs. Fewer emails. Fewer key decisions ran through me. Some of my longtime contacts told me they'd been instructed to deal with the new leadership. I got the message. Ethan didn't just want my job. He wanted to erase any trace that I was ever part of this company. That night, I came home later than usual. I sat on the old wooden chair out on the porch, watching the sunset filter through the trees, and I felt something was ending. Not because I was weaker or had failed, but because in a world where family ties trump real effort, loyalty no longer meant much. I didn't know exactly what would come next. But I could feel it. A storm was coming. Just 2 weeks after Ethan called me Uncle, I realized how quickly I was being pushed to the margins. The task schedules I used to update each morning? Replaced by documents from Ethan's strategy division. The people who used to report to me? Now waited for his instructions. Even my internal access badge got restricted. I couldn't enter the central operations area anymore, the very place I had helped design, down to the control panels and access points. At first, I thought it was a system glitch. But then I realized, this wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. A calculated, methodical plan. And it had probably been in motion since the day Ethan walked through our company's front door. Wednesday morning at 8:30, I was called into HR for a surprise meeting. The room was ice cold, with only 2 people already seated, Ethan and Clara, the HR attorney I once helped get special maternity leave approved 2 years ago. I sat down, trying to stay calm. Clara was the first to speak. "Jack, today's meeting is regarding your performance review for the past quarter." Ethan cut in. "We've done a review and found that over the last 3 months, several of the metrics under your supervision didn't meet expectations. The procedures you proposed no longer align with our digital strategy, and the feedback from some partners hasn't been positive." I chuckled. "Which partners?" "I just got a thank you email from GreenTrack last week." Ethan didn't answer. He simply slid a paper envelope across the table. Inside was a printed letter that read, "Employment termination, effective immediately." I stared at him. "So after 25 years, you end things with me using a pre-printed letter?" Ethan shrugged. "We'll provide a severance package. You have 2 weeks to hand things over, or less if you prefer. But starting today, your system access will be deactivated." I sat there, saying nothing. A part of me wanted to slam the table and yell, "I gave this company my youth, and you use family connections to toss me out like a dog." But instead I gripped the envelope tightly, stood up, and said, "All right. But remember this, Ethan. I taught you everything you know. But I never taught you everything I know." I walked out of that room with my head held high. Still, there was a storm raging inside me. The next day, there was no farewell, no thank you email from management. A few former coworkers sent me encouraging messages, but they were afraid of getting involved, afraid of being noticed. I understood, and I didn't blame anyone. What hurt most wasn't losing the job. It was how they did it, cold, emotionless, as if I had never existed. 25 years, over a quarter of a century, erased with a few signatures and a condescending look. I went home and sat alone in the garage, the same place I used to fix up my old pickup truck, the same place I taught my daughter how to check engine oil. I looked at the plaque that said, 20-year service award, now covered in dust. I took it down and put it in a box. It didn't mean anything anymore. The following week, I walked a lot. Every morning, I strolled through the familiar streets of Amarillo, trying to keep my head from exploding with anger. I thought about my wife. She had always been the one to keep me grounded. And yes, when I told her what happened, she simply put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You've lived right. Now it's time to live for yourself." I didn't spiral into despair. I didn't drink. I didn't run away. I knew one thing: Ethan could take my title, take the job I built, but he couldn't take away the trust one had earned from clients, coworkers, and myself over the past 25 years. All I needed was a plan. And I had one, by that very night. That night, after packing away the last of my keepsakes in the garage, I opened up my old laptop, dusty and long unused. It booted up slowly, but I wasn't in a hurry. I was slowing down to take a clear look at what I still had left. My hard drive still held all my old work files, detailed operational procedures, partner contact lists, sample quotes, and the internal training schedules I had created over the years. Not because I planned to keep them, but because I was always careful, just in case the company's systems crashed or someone accidentally deleted data. Now those files were my most valuable assets. For the first 3 days after leaving, I did nothing but write. I documented every process I had ever improved, the industry inefficiencies Ethan couldn't see, and the gaps in how Keller Tech currently operated, gaps I could exploit to surpass them. I wasn't dreaming of revenge. I knew Ethan had the upper hand, connections, the position, the resources. But I also knew his one weakness: arrogance. He thought that with tech and ties, he could run an entire field operations system without seasoned experience. And that's exactly where I would start. I called Mike Weston, an old colleague who used to lead the Western Region Tech team. He too had been quietly pushed out months ago. When I told him my idea of starting a company focused on equipment supply and real-world tech support, Mike didn't hesitate. "Count me in. I don't need a big paycheck, just a place to work with integrity." Next was Elijah, a mechanical electrical engineer I'd trained since he was 22. Now 31, Elijah was fed up with Ethan's leadership, unrealistic deadlines, impractical decisions, and a team that made more slides than actual solutions. He told me, "If you start a company, I'm in. I'm exhausted." Really? One by one, I started reconnecting. No noise. No big announcements. Just the people who had been through hell with me, pulling all-nighters to fix generators on remote sites, driving through the night to make deadlines. I registered the new company under the name True Torque Solutions, a name with a double meaning. Torque, as in the force that keeps machinery turning. And true, as in honest, genuine, built on real value. No nepotism, no hype. The first office was my garage, renovated in 2 weeks. An old printer, a few wooden desks, a whiteboard. But to me, it felt like freedom. For the first time in years, no one was pulling my strings or looking at me like I was in the way. My first move was picking the right niche. I couldn't compete with Keller Tech in size, but I knew they were neglecting a whole segment: small and mid-sized clients, independent builders, mid-level oil companies in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. They didn't want bloated processes or flashy slides. They wanted the right product, at the right time, with the right expertise, and that was what I did best. I started reaching out to former clients, not with fancy business cards or bold slogans. I sent emails with one simple line. "I'm Jack Harmon, the guy who fixed your equipment issue back in winter 2019. I'm now running my own company. I'm not asking for anything, just wondering, could we have a chance next time?" Nearly half didn't respond. A quarter said no. But the rest? They were opportunity. The first client was a small gas extraction company in Midland. They placed a rush order. An industrial valve had failed mid-operation. True Torque delivered in 36 hours. No advertisement beats doing the job right the first time. From then on, I made a rule. Don't accept any job you wouldn't personally do yourself. Little by little, True Torque began to grow. We didn't have a flashy logo or a big office. But each returning client, each new engineer joining, each thank you message, was a sign I was on the right path. I didn't mention Ethan to anyone. No need. I was too busy rebuilding myself. And I knew the day of reckoning would come, not as a defeated man, but as someone who rose above the very place that once cast him out. 3 months after founding True Torque Solutions, I was standing on a blazing hot job site in southern El Paso, holding a revised blueprint a young engineer had just sent in with an error. I didn't yell. I just corrected it with a red pen and called him over, showing him how a 2-inch deviation could compromise the entire pressure system. He lowered his head and mumbled an apology, then said, "They never taught us this at Keller Tech." I smiled. Nothing more needed to be said. I began winning clients back the only way I knew how, through real work, real service, no empty promises. Keller Tech at the time was going all in on marketing, rolling out flashy campaigns about logistics system digitalization, with videos hyping up AI and automation. But the people I'd worked with knew the truth. No machine can replace field knowledge, especially in a technical equipment industry as demanding as ours. The second client I approached was Armada Drilling, a family-owned oil drilling company in the Midland area. I had helped them with a pressure valve failure back in 2018. When I called back, the owner, Roy, remembered right away. "Jack, that you? Heard they kicked you out like trash. You running your own shop now?" I simply replied. "I'm still doing what I've always done. Just doing it my way now." Roy tested me with a rush replacement order. Keller Tech said it would take 5 days. I pulled my team together, had techs drive overnight, personally inspected every step, and delivered 18 hours ahead of schedule. The result? Armada transferred their entire next quarter order to True Torque. A small contract, but the perfect breakthrough. Ethan, of course, didn't sit still. I heard he was getting upset about the lost clients. He sent people to reevaluate old accounts and tried underbidding us. But I wasn't worried. Because I knew what kept clients wasn't just price, it was trust. I'd seen companies collapse because they laid off experienced workers and replaced them with slide deck specialists, people who understood the product through charts, but had no clue what customers needed during a storm, or when systems failed, or when a pipe burst at 2 a.m. Ethan didn't get that. And he was slowly losing everything I had spent years building. The game wasn't just about engineering anymore, it had become a battle of reputation. I started getting strange calls. "Jack, could you help us rework the system over at Gila Refinery? Heard Keller Tech's install is leaking pressure. We've signed with them, but if you'll provide the tech support, I'm willing to pay out of pocket." I wasn't happy they were failing, but I knew it was bound to happen. They chose Keller Tech for its name and low prices. They came back to me because I'd never let them down. The turning point came when Cactus Energy, one of Keller Tech's biggest clients last year, responsible for 18% of their revenue, reached out to me. I had handled their entire supply chain for 6 years. Ethan tried to keep them with huge incentives, but they said straight out, "We need someone who understands us, not PowerPoint." Cactus signed a 3-year long-term contract with True Torque. That was the pivot point. News spread like wildfire. I didn't throw a party. I didn't make a bold statement. I just kept working. Every new contract was another cut into Ethan's pride, quiet but deep. I heard Ethan started blaming the engineering department, then began replacing department heads one after another. Internal meetings at Keller Tech grew tense. A former engineer messaged me. "They started banning your name from being mentioned in the office." I read the message, then locked my phone. Not because I was sad, but because I was in a meeting with a new client, one who had just pulled out of a Keller Tech deal to work with people who actually deliver. I was once considered outdated, a man of the past. Now the past was coming back, not to mourn, but to reclaim everything. 9 months after I left Keller Tech, I sat in a conference room in Austin, facing the executive board of Frontier Logistics, one of the largest transportation and warehousing corporations in the southern U.S. The CEO, Mr. Mason Price, looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Jack, can you handle all equipment supply for the upcoming federal project? It's worth nearly $12 million. I didn't answer right away. I opened the plan I'd prepared. No slides, no 3D graphics. Just a simple spreadsheet, timelines, equipment, manpower, down to the last bolt. I said, "I won't promise anything I can't do. But if you give me the job, I guarantee equipment will arrive on time, built to spec, and if anything goes wrong, I'll be the first one on site." Mason nodded. "I believe you, Jack. I've heard enough about what you've done, and what the other guys haven't." We shook hands. The contract with Frontier was a crushing blow to Kellertech. I didn't make any public statements. I didn't talk anyone down. But the entire industry knew TrueTorque, a company just over a year old, had just snatched the biggest contract from the hands of a corporate giant long favored by the elite. On the day we signed the deal, I got a call from an unknown number. I picked up. "Hello, Jack. This is Warren Keller." His voice was still deep, but not nearly as confident as before. "I know things with Ethan didn't go well. I wanted to invite you to dinner. There are some things I'd like to discuss." I paused for a few seconds, then politely declined. "Thank you, but I'm no longer the one asking for opportunities." I knew that call wasn't just a courtesy. It was an admission of defeat. Within a year, 7 major clients who once worked with Kellertech had switched to TrueTorque. Many of them had been brushed aside, underpriced, or pushed out of contracts by Ethan for not fitting the digital transformation strategy. I didn't win them over out of spite. I just opened the door and showed them one thing: real value still exists. And it doesn't come in fancy presentations. As for Ethan, news began to leak out. After losing a series of major contracts, Kellertech's board of directors applied pressure. Warren Keller, the CEO and also Ethan's father-in-law, was forced to take a leave for restructuring. And Ethan was officially dismissed during a closed-door meeting. I didn't feel joy. I didn't celebrate victory. I just felt peace. Someone asked me afterward, "Jack, don't you feel vindicated? After everything you won?" I thought for a moment and said, "No. I never wanted to win against anyone. I just didn't want someone else to define who I am." And that's the truth. One late autumn afternoon, I passed by the old Kellertech yard. Not for anything specific, just happened to be driving by. It wasn't the same anymore. Empty, cold, like the place had lost its soul. I stood behind the fence, looking at the rusting containers, remembering the days when my team and I raced against time, pulling all-nighters in the winter, sweat mixed with mud and engine grease. Now, I no longer belonged to that place. And strangely, I didn't feel regret anymore. Now, I'm surrounded by people who don't have to suck up to keep their jobs. The ones once labeled too old, too quiet, too meticulous, but who are, in truth, the backbone of this industry. I succeeded not because I got revenge better. I succeeded because I chose to stand up instead of lying down and holding on to resentment. Because I believe, in a world obsessed with flash, there are still customers who want honesty, quality, and humble integrity. And if you've ever been betrayed, sidelined, or called past your prime, remember this: they might push you out, but they can't erase what you've done, or what you're about to do. One Monday morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The first rays of sunlight poured through the small glass window of the old garage, which had now become the official headquarters of TrueTorque Solutions. I brewed myself a cup of black coffee and sat down at my desk. No noise, no pressure hanging over my head. Just a quiet that felt real, the kind you only feel when you know you're on the right path, walking it on your own 2 feet. I opened my email. A message from Elijah, the young engineer I once trained. "Uncle Jack, our team finished the Nevada job 2 days early yesterday. The client sends their thanks. I'm proud to have learned from you." I read it again and again, and suddenly laughed. Not because of the praise, but because I saw myself from 30 years ago, a kid with no degree, no connections, just a belief in honest work. Someone once told me, "Jack, you're too soft, you'll get eaten alive in this world." Maybe they were right for a while. But in the long run, I believe this. No one can destroy someone who lives and works with everything they've got. I don't have power, or powerful relatives, but I have something they can't buy: trust. My story isn't about revenge. It's about coming back. At the right time. In the right way. And true to who I am. If you're in the worst phase of your life, betrayed, cast aside, disrespected, remember this. You don't need anyone's approval to have worth. You just need to stand up. Keep going. And live true to yourself. The rest, time will take care of. I'm Jack Harmon. And I was fired after 25 years. But it was only after that I truly found myself. Jack Harmon's story isn't just about betrayal and being fired after 25 years of service. It's a powerful testament to the strength of integrity and real values. He didn't fight back with hatred, but with quiet, effective actions. The more I read, the more I felt, sometimes, losing a position is exactly what it takes to find yourself again. Jack didn't just rise, he walked forward stronger than ever. A reminder that honesty never goes out of style. What do you think about Jack Harmon's story? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional, meaningful, and surprising stories about life, family, and powerful lessons.